And also responding to yesterday's budget speech, the Singapore Manufacturing Federation says sectors like general manufacturing, oil and gas, and chemicals will be the hardest hit by some of the hikes announced. Starting next year, the qualifying salary for S-Pass holders will go up by $300, while that for employment pass holders will rise by $400. Work permit levies for some sectors will also increase from 2028. Rachel Ting with more.
Third-generation CEO Melvin Tan runs an engineering firm with projects in industries as varied as semiconductors, energy, marine and more. Over half of his 700 workers are foreigners holding work passes in the construction, marine and process sectors. He says he will have to bear wage and levy hikes for over half of his foreign workers following measures unveiled in this year's budget. He expects to have to absorb these additional costs.
If we haven't won the projects yet, we can build in the additional costs. But for projects that we have secured, those that are in the longer term contracts that go beyond 2027, I don't think we can pass it on to the clients. Our clients happen to be government as well. So on the one hand, they have fixed our contract value, but on the other hand, we have raised our levy. So we are trying to figure out and navigate this challenge.
He says it would help for such policies to only be rolled out in 2 to 3 years' time instead of just one. This will help buffer against contracts that have already been fixed. He adds that Singaporeans don't want to take on such jobs. Businesses like his are turning to automation as a long-term solution to plug manpower gaps. The Singapore Manufacturing Federation calls for stronger support to do so, such as boosting the existing Enterprise Development Grant.
Based on our research, the grant is only good up to 25% of their processes to be automated, versus I think we want to be closer to 75% of the processes being automated. So there'll be more help, either through interest-free loans, either through a higher grant for this sector.
As of last June, there are over 201,000 employment pass holders in Singapore, as well as over 177,000 S-Pass holders. More than 460,000 hold work permits in the construction, marine shipyard and process sectors.
And for more, joining us in the studio is the Chief Executive Officer of the Singapore Business Federation, Kok Ping Soon. Ping Soon, great to have you in the studio with us again.
Thank you.
Now, as we heard from the story earlier, SBF has called for greater access to foreign manpower. But in the budget, you'll see that the qualifying salaries for employment pass holders and also S-Pass holders will be going up. What is the response on the ground from businesses on your end?
Well, I think businesses understand and accept the need for Singapore to have a workforce that has a strong Singaporean core, and that foreigners are meant to be complementary and not substitute to locals. But the measures that you say will lead to increased business costs. And the concerns are really on two ends. On the employment pass end, the concern is whether this increase will make it more expensive for MNCs to consider to locate their operations in Singapore for manufacturing operations, Centre of Excellence or RHQs. Now, if you add in rental costs, cost of living, it does make Singapore a pretty expensive place for men to set up operations here compared to the region and the global locations. Already, you have seen some MNCs relocating out from Singapore, and as a result, local jobs are lost. So we got to watch this quite carefully.
Yeah, there's definitely some concern there as well.
Indeed. But for special pass holders on the other end, I think the increase is going to compress the margins of many of the domestically oriented sectors like F&B and retail. Now, we know that these companies are operating on very tight margins. We know that the price signal is meant to nudge companies to digitalize, to hire more locals, to automate their operations. And many of these companies have already responded. They have digitalized it, they've done that. So there's probably not a lot of headroom left for them to absorb this increase. So what's going to happen? Well, there's two things that are going to happen, and it's unlikely to be good for consumers. One, they'll have to increase their prices, which will hurt our wallets. And two, they may need to cut back their operations to be viable, and that will reduce our choices. But I suppose at the end of the day, this may well be the price that we have to pay in order to have a strong social compact.
Yeah, but in order to address, some of these pressures, what would you say are some of the biggest pressures that companies are facing right now? And does this budget really address the concerns of businesses?
I think the top three pressures companies are facing now, number one is manpower costs, number two is uncertainty in customer demand, and number three is in financing costs. The broad-based measure that's been introduced, such as the corporate income tax rebate, will provide some relief, although the level of support is slightly lower. And the government has also provided some cushioning of some of the increases in manpower costs related to the increase of CPF rate for senior workers, as well as the increase in wages of progressive low-wage workers. I don't think it's meaningful for us to kind of keep a ledger, right, to say what is high and what is support. And I think it's important for us, and businesses will always ask for more, particularly in the context that last year the government has generated a higher than expected surplus of $15 billion, which is 1.9% of GDP. But I think we need to put that into context, and two things we need to remember. I think, yes, although the support for some of the immediate cost relief may not be as generous as what businesses would want, lots more are being put in to invest in building longer-term capabilities. The huge investment in AI, the investment to help companies internationalize, as well as a top-up in the startup capital. And number two, given the current uncertainty and the fact that this is only the first year in the new term of the government, I think it's fair for the government to have save some of the gunpowder for tomorrow.
Yeah, well, among all these pressures as well, the Prime Minister has also encouraged businesses and companies to expand overseas. So these include growing markets like Latin America, we have Africa, we have the Middle East. In your read of things, are SBF members willing and optimistic about the opportunities that might come out of taking these risks into these overseas markets? Well,
if you think about these markets, I think three words come to mind. They are exciting, they're exotic, but they're also rather expensive. So they're really not for the faint-hearted. For these markets, companies need to have patient capital, they need to have good local partners, and they really need to invest time in building relationships. So, but, well, fortune favors the bold. So I think, and of the three markets that you mentioned, I think Middle East in particular is showing a lot of promise. There's a lot of investments in infrastructure as well as in green energy, which opens up opportunities for our architecture and engineering services and renewable energy companies, which is why SBF last year, set up an office in Dubai. And some of the measures that's being announced to help companies internationalize will help. But I think we can do more. How can we do more? I think we need to do more to get our companies to hunt in the pack. Precisely because these are frontier markets, I think some of our bigger companies, our Temasek portfolio companies, should do more to actively bring SMEs along so that we can hunt in the pack. And perhaps the government can support trade associations more to set up Singapore pavilions in the major trade shows so that our SMEs understand the opportunities, they can increase their visibility and do lead generation.
Ping Soon, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. I've been chatting with Kok Ping Soon, who is CEO of the Singapore Business Federation.